Hello, everyone. My name is Matthew Moore. I have decided to do the importance of positive relationships for those who suffer from cell phone addiction. Before we get started, I'd like to cover why are positive relationships important. So, after doing some research, I found an important quote from the Health study in 2010, where they shared that dozens of studies have shown that people who have social support from family, friends, and their community are happier, have fewer health problems, and live longer. So with that, I added that humans are naturally social creatures. So there has been reputable research done that's proven the positive effects of social interaction, as well as reversely the negative effects of those who rarely interact with others. In my opinion, though, I believe that it goes deeper than just interaction. I believe there must be a physical aspect that's present as well. An example would be those who suffer from cell phone addiction. Though they may be involved in social media, which involves interaction, is that enough? So what is cell phone addiction and how does it affect the brain? So our brain contains several pathways that transmits a feel-good chemical called dopamine, which can be rewarding in situations. For many people, social interactions stimulate the release of dopamine. Because so many people use their cell phones as tools for social interactions, they can become accustomed to constantly checking them for that hit of dopamine that's released when they connect with others on social media and through other apps. I believe in moderation, cell phones can actually be very valuable assets or tools. I think that 100 years ago, had they had cell phones with the technology we had today, they would have never suffered the type of pain and suffering that they had. However, when used or often in substitution for real social interactions, I believe there can be adverse side effects. In a much less life-altering comparison, those who use drugs rather than face their problems are kind of like those who use cell phones to avoid their social interactions. Again, it is not on the same scale, but I believe it is somewhat similar. So how can those who are addicted to cell phones overcome the addiction? Many of those who are addicted to cell phones may be unaware of what is happening, especially in a time where cell phones are widely accepted, and young adults are not socially reprimanded for constantly being on their phones. For those who want to make a change, there are a few steps to take. One would be to schedule a time for no devices. The best way to do this would be to adhere to this rule. So obviously, if you set this rule, you would be the one that is in control. You would have to make sure that you're following this. Two would be delete certain apps or limit notifications. And a lot of times when notifications are set up, I think it kind of triggers us to want to look at it. It's kind of like that bell of Pavlov's dog. Once we see that notification, our brain is triggered to check it. As well as deleting certain apps. Now, I know in the past I've tried to do this with Facebook or Instagram. Then a couple days later, I end up downloading it again. However, I think if you're able to adhere to your rules, that is a very good step to take. And lastly would be to replace normal phone routines with other activities. I think this is the most important one because this kind of gets you set up for the day. So an example would be using your phone when you first wake up. So instead of like how a lot of us do when we first wake up, we check our phones, we check our notifications. I think it would be wiser to maybe read a chapter out of a book or meditate. Um, Now, I know a lot of times this isn't possible because there are important text messages that we have to answer to. But I think that if you just take 5 minutes as soon as you wake up to just sit there and breathe and think about what you want to do for your day and how you want to make the changes in your life, that would be a positive effect. And coming into personal experiences. So I am 26 years old, which meant that I grew up in the early 2000s. I was born in 1999, so I was in school by 2005, and I graduated in 2017. So I was actually able to personally experience this huge leap in technology. My graduating class of 2017 was actually the last class in our district to not receive Chromebooks or laptops. So when we were in school, when I was in 8th grade, is when they actually started to pass out the Chromebooks. and everybody in our school, not everybody, but all of the 6th and 7th graders in our school received these, and we did not. So this meant that our class completed all of our work the traditional way. Now, this was also a time where cell phones were starting to become innovative. So many of us had cell phones by the time we were probably 12 or 13, but we were not addicted to them the same way that um, young adults are now. I think a lot of us had flip phones, so we weren't even able to do the things that you can nowadays. So we were able to text and make phone calls, but aside from that, we weren't able to surf the internet or download apps. Um, so observing this as someone who understands the technology but isn't completely captured by it is somewhat unsettling to witness. Not to sound like an old person, but that's how I feel a lot of times. Is I do look at this younger generation and I see them completely captured by the technology. Um, and then kind of on a funny tangent, I think when you hear the term iPad baby, that is actually accurate. Now, there are a lot of kids nowadays that are attached to these things. They are their babysitters. They are their number one toy. Um, and as mentioned before, I think that they can be used very valuably. But when it comes to social interactions and positive social interactions, technology tends to get in the way of that. So luckily, there are methods to intervene and ensure that continued social interaction is amongst the upcoming generations. And here are my references. Thank you.